Hi, this is JR. This is a spontaneous comment on freedom from guilt. So, to talk about freedom from guilt, of course, that presumes that I have an interest in freedom, in particular, freedom from guilt, and I assume everyone is clear on what I mean by freedom. I think that specifying exactly what I mean by guilt is actually really important to having freedom from guilt. Really just understanding what guilt is can make a big difference. So, regret is not guilt. Disappointment is not guilt. But they are related to guilt. So, guilt, of course, has to do with the past in some particular way, some incident, or maybe the expectation that I would have done something that I didn't do. I could have guilt about not doing something. I could have guilt about doing something. I can also project guilt, or I can guilt trip people. I can blame a group of people, an individual person, and if I were to say freedom from blame, you might think, well, freedom from blame, is that what I want? It's not really freedom from blame. There's still a element of there's still a potential function to blame, and in fact, there could be there certainly is a functionality to guilt. I'm getting pretty far ahead in a way. So let's start with what guilt is, how guilt works, and then we'll talk about how it could be functional, when it could be appropriate, um, and so on. What is guilt? Guilt is a particular way of relating to some detail. What is the guilty way of relating to something? That, however things went, that particular way that things went is not what I prefer. That's very important. It is not what I would have preferred, or at this point, at this time right now, I would prefer that something else had happened. And it's someone's fault. And it's my fault. So those elements together are what we call guilt. So individually, they're not necessarily guilt. I would prefer that things went different from how they did go. That could be a preference. It doesn't even need to be a disappointment or a regret. Disappointment and regret tend to have some element of I could have done better, or I could learn from that. I really was, startled at how important that issue was to me. That's how disappointment arises, is when somebody is surprised by something being important to them. If you already knew it was important and it didn't work out as you expected, I don't know that you'd actually experience disappointment. You would, it would be a different tone or a different quality. I would just be like, oh, I'm unsatisfied. I'm motivated to try something new. But there's a a very clean kind of, oh, I have a preference for something else. That can be very clean, very coherent, very Simple. I wish the past would have been different. I don't have the sense that I can really do anything about it. I'm powerless. I'm helpless in general. And the reason I'm helpless is because of those other people. That's one common way that people could relate to a situation. I'm not saying it's inaccurate, to attribute power to some other party or group. That's quite reasonable, really. Once I think I should have known better, I shouldn't have trusted them. That becomes one of the elements of when I am blaming someone else or some other group, and then I think I should have known better. That's when I turn that resentment or blame back toward myself and have guilt about it. They betrayed me and I was stupid. And I shouldn't have been stupid, and I should have been smarter. And when I was born, I should have been, older. I should have been more mature, more experienced, more knowledgeable. So it can get into some pretty nonsensical, delusional ideas or ideals. Freedom from guilt corresponds to being free to just have disappointment be disappointment, as well as frustration, regret. I can just have a welcoming for those experiences. And for me to be able to welcome those experiences, I'd have to, it would be valuable to have a general stability and security in my life. So if I have general stability and security and calmness, then I can notice disappointment as disappointment, notice regret as regret. Oh, I did something that I didn't like the outcome of, or I didn't do something and I would have liked, I imagined I could have had a better outcome. So that could be regret. Disappointment could be, I don't like what the other person did. I don't like what that other group did. It doesn't necessarily have to involve my own action or interaction. Regret has a personal aspect. Disappointment can be more, oh, I'm just processing, oh, well, I'm really disappointed. My favorite team lost. I thought they were going to win. I put some money on the game. I'm disappointed. Do I regret putting money on the game? Yes, I do. In some small way, maybe pretty small, but there's disappointment in regard to some outcome that didn't really, involve me as directly as regret might. So that's one of the differences between regret and disappointment. But hey, how about this? I'm disappointed that my team lost, and the referees in the game really, really ruined the game. I mean, my team performed quite well, but the referees, the referees were horrible. My team couldn't have overcome the disadvantage of the idiot refs. So if I'm relating to something like that, then I'm guilt tripping the refs, and at some point, if I'm projecting guilt or projecting blame in a certain way, I got results I don't like, and I'm blaming, other people that aren't even around, and I'm not talking to them. I'm not making a request that they review the call and do a TV replay booth review of a sporting event's play. But if I'm just kind of vaguely, throwing out my dissatisfaction and kind of speaking from, I don't have any power, I'm helpless, it's the officials, I can't do anything about it, resignation, cynicism, the officials, they're horrible. I'm justifying at that point, or it can cross some boundary of logic into the realm of justifying. So I don't like the results I got. I would prefer some other result, and those people are to blame, not me, them. So I'm justifying it, and in the background maybe, yeah, I blame them, but I should have known better. Those refs, you know, I've had this complaint now 14 times. If I had the complaint once, then I stop, you know, betting on games because I'm like, hey, you know what, I can't rely on the officials to to call the game fairly or whatever. So then I just I could stop. Say, okay, I regret that. I don't have to have any resentment about the bad calls by the officials, or the inaction by those other people, or the resistance by that one person, or whatever, the, you know, their lack of responsiveness. So rather than justify why other people are the problem and then keep doing the thing, I could just, you know, be disappointed. I could just experience regret and change my, if I have a certain momentum of behavior or a habit, I might adjust it. I might slow it down, change it some other way. But if I've done something that was disappointing 14 times, and I 14 times keep making the same complaint, at some point it could build up into guilt, where I'm like, yeah, this is stupid. I can't believe I keep doing this. I know that those officials are unreliable, and I keep, you know, betting on games, and the officials keep, you know, being biased or whatever, and it's not my team. It's just not my team. That it's not me betting on my team. It's not my team. It's the officials. So if I'm speaking in a way like that, then there could be a buildup of guilt, and I can then have this resentment or anger towards the horrible officials for ruining my life. And what I really get to at some point is that guilt has this element of anger. If I'm guilt tripping somebody else, there's an element of anger. And if I turn that anger back in towards myself, I'm not expressing it or displaying it to, at least to the relevant party. Maybe I'm, you know, I don't know, if I'm saying I'm angry at what the officials did, and I'm going to contact the league, and I'm going to ask for a review, and, you know, discipline those officials, or review their, you know, the quality of their officiating. So there's things I could do out of anger that actually could make a difference in the future. But if I'm really doing nothing to promote my preferences, such as that a game would be called fairly and called well by officials, if I'm doing nothing to promote my preferences, then the guilt that I internalize can just build up into anger. I'm angry at everybody, and I'm not expressing anger directly. There can be a lot of passive aggression, and then I had an outburst, and I feel horrible that I did the imperfect thing of displaying anger, because I should never display anger, because a perfect person would never be angry, and a perfect person would never be afraid, and a perfect person would never experience sadness or disappointment or regret or guilt or shame or, you know, confusion. Would a perfect person ever experience confusion? What does a perfect person mean? People experience confusion. Actual people, perfect or not, actual people experience confusion, anger, disappointment, fear, you know, caution, alertness, worry, panic, paranoia, this whole range of things, hysteria. Oh, I'm concerned about this medical issue or this economic issue or this political issue or this personal issue. People experience worry. They experience paranoia, hysteria. These are normal things in some amount. So if I'm free to experience anger and free to experience disappointment, then guilt might not arise. And so if I experience being like blocked in regard to experiencing anger or displaying anger, expressing it, well then the option that comes to mind to share is to find small, simple, easy experiments in the display of anger or the speaking of disappointment. I'm disappointed that we produce blah 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 result. It's not a statement that implies blame within it. There can be a tone that I'm disappointed that we da, 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 and it can sound like blame. But someone can simply express disappointment. You know, I would prefer that in the future, blah 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 blah. I'm disappointed that in the past, blah blah blah, and in the future I would prefer blah blah blah, or I'm committed to blah blah blah, and I'm interested in how we can produce that, or how I can produce that. So those are some models in language that we are free to experiment with, to explore, to practice. As far as anger, if I think, well, I didn't like how things went, I would really prefer some other outcome, and actually I'm angry about a specific incident. Just as a side note, if someone's angry about a group of people being jerks, that's not very specific. Sometimes if I say, hey, I'm really, you know, angry that you people are being such jerks, stop it. That could work. It's possible. It could work at least temporarily. It could have some result that is considered favorable. More specific would be, I'm angry that you said da da da, and then you did blah blah blah, and you didn't notify me that you weren't gonna do what you originally said. And, for us to make future plans, I want to hear from you about what went on, because I was really angry. I was disappointed and angry at you personally for how things went. So if I'm missing an important piece of the, you know, history here, and there's a reason that I don't know why it happened that way, so be it. But otherwise, there's a confidence issue for me in terms of not being confident in some other person or some group of people. So I can voice to them my anger and, you know, disappointment, and do so in a way that's future oriented. Like I want to know, should I, you know, withdraw a little or completely from a particular conversation or a particular relationship, a particular plan? Should we just cancel this plan? Should we just postpone it and say for the immediate future we're gonna just, you know, put that on hold. Nothing. Not gonna count on anything until you get your situation handled, and you get back to me, or I'll get back to you in 2 weeks or 2 years or whatever. And there doesn't have to be an ongoing disappointment or resentment. There could just be anger, the expressing of anger, I'm disappointed and angry about that particular thing, and the anger is, you know, I want to interrupt the past momentum, and I want to put a wall or a boundary so that there's focus, so there's concentration, so the things that are important to me are recognized by the other people involved, or by one other person involved. So is it okay to experience anger? Well, it happens sometimes. The idea, this is a really fascinating idea, really. The idea that someone should never experience anger is quite odd. So if I, as a parent, am relating to my children, or for instance, as people who should never experience fear or anger or disappointment, how well does that work in parenting a 2-year-old? The 2-year-old should never experience anger, disappointment, or fear, or confusion. How about parenting a 12-year-old, for instance? The 12-year-old should never experience fear, confusion, disappointment, or anger. How about if I'm the parent of a 21-year-old? A 21-year-old. So the 21-year-old should experience what? Should they ever experience fear, anger, disappointment, regret, guilt, confusion? If they do experience those things, is it my preference that they communicate them to me, or be willing to communicate them to me if relevant? So if I'm free from guilt, I mean free from latent guilt. Guilt could come up in the future. Am I open to other people experiencing guilt and displaying it, sharing it? Am I open to other people experiencing anger, blame, or condemnation, or fear, like intense fear, and displaying it somehow? What if people display their emotions indirectly? What if there's a hesitance or a repression or a conflict of emotions going on for someone, and they are passive aggressive toward me? How do I relate to that? I could notice it. I could be attentive to that possibility, notice it, and then depending on my relationship with them, my interest in them, I either interact with them or withdraw, or don't interact. There's some people that I initiate interaction with. I inquire, how are you doing? I call them and I ask, how are you? What's new? And so on. But I don't do that with all 7 billion or so people on the planet. I notice that this idea that everyone should unconditionally love everyone else all of the time is a source of tremendous shame and guilt. And people will in some cases, I'm going to say frequently, people will project this idea of, oh, those other people, I condemn them because they should unconditionally love everyone always. And they should never condemn anyone, so I condemn them because they're human. And they don't unconditionally love everyone all the time, always, without any exception. They weren't born with the maturity of an adult. As a child, they still had things to learn. As a teenager, they still had things to learn. As an adult, wow, they still had things to learn. As an adult, really? Come on. An adult? Still having to learn things? Don't know everything already by 21? By 53? So freedom is really what I've been talking about, but I've been talking about freedom in regard to emotions, and we've been talking about how language is related to emotions, and the particular emotion that I brought up initially is guilt. Guilt being something in the past happened that I am concerned about. I might be concerned for future punishment, and I may want to justify who else is to blame for some past result or past occurrence. If I justify who else is to blame, then that can somebody might think of punishing them instead of me, or not punishing me. Whether they punish whether somebody else gets punished or not. The idea is by projecting guilt or projecting condemnation, I can avoid a anticipated punishment or possible an anticipated possible punishment. So if I'm afraid about a punishment, I don't want people to be angry at me. I'm disappointed about it. I'm conflicted about it. Guilt is actually a normal experience. So freedom from guilt, in a way, it means I'm free to have had guilt in the past and not really make a big issue of it. Guilt could arise in the future, in the present moment. We could even say, I welcome all emotions. I welcome guilt. I welcome all experiences. That's freedom. That's power, and it takes an element of stability. It may take some time to have the luxury to invite what might be complex or intense emotions, some fear, like an old intense fear, some disappointment, some anger, even rage, fury. So this is about freedom. Because humans can experience confusion and ignorance, because they can make mistakes in the sense of having one intention and then taking actions that don't fit that, that produce results that don't fit their intention. So humans can have an intention, take action sincerely, produce results that don't fit their original intention, and then there's a variety of things that can happen from there. There can be disappointment, there can be blame, justification. The space to be human, meaning the freedom to recognize my own humanity, also correlates to the freedom to recognize other people's humanity, their human nature, their human frailties, or their learning process, their development process. We go through confusion. There is no point at which I should never have confusion. The issue with confusion is small confusions, somewhat infrequently spaced out in time, so I can handle each one of them individually. Oh, I'm confused about this. Then if it's important to me, then I clarify whatever the issue was. And if I go through a sequence of relatively small confusions, that's called learning. That's how learning happens, or that's how innovation happens. As distinct from a learning where somebody's teaching me something, I'm just kind of following along with instruction. But if I'm learning something through experimentation, occasionally I'm going to notice a pattern, and then I'm going to notice some variation from that pattern. And if I think the world should always fit with my expectation to it, and when there's a difference between my expectation and the world, that's a problem with the world. Someone's to blame. I should feel guilty. That, all these complex weird things. That's distinct from I have an expectation about life or the world, and then I notice that life doesn't fit that. So I change my expectation. I go, oh, my expectation was not a fit for reality. I formed an expectation. It developed. Okay, maybe people influenced me to have that expectation. Maybe not. Whatever. Once I realize that that expectation is not a match, then I release it as an expectation, or I refine it. So guilt has to do with, I don't want to admit I was naive. I don't want to admit I made an error. I know I made an error. I know I was naive, but I'm afraid of the consequences of just acknowledging I'm human. I made a mistake. That's guilt. I don't want to acknowledge regret and my own involvement in regret. That's guilt. There's a resistance to simple disappointment or regret, a resistance to fear. Rather than just being afraid of punishment and admitting it and taking action in relation to it, guilt is like a paralyzing fear of punishment. Or maybe not paralyzing, but such an intense fear of punishment that someone has an element of panic. They get confused. They do something a little odd, maybe a distraction. Some weird coping mechanism. It's like a breakdown. So this idea that there's an expectation of possible punishment and fear about it. Why not? Why shouldn't someone occasionally expect punishment or negative consequences, unappealing consequences, and then fear them, and then maybe do something like be cautious about what they say, how they say it, who they say it to, and so on. That kind of guilt is adaptive. That's normal. That's pretty normal, really. Then and I said it's adaptive. It's understandable, and it can be adaptive. And then there's that issue of, if I have fear, who can I actually display or express that fear with? Who is interested in me enough and mature enough, able to just get it, just understand it. In cases where there's an expectation of a possible future punishment, and it's a very intense fear that I might have in regard to that possible punishment, then all sorts of really complex things can happen. Oh, I feel so bad because you shouldn't have to hear sneezing ever, and you did, and I apologize. That's horrible that anyone would ever have to hear sneezing. That must be so hard for you. So, guilt is when I'm responsible for other people's disappointment. Other people shouldn't be disappointed, and I'm responsible for it. And they're gonna, there's gonna be there could be negative consequences for me socially, that other people are disappointed. So I'm just, I'm so sorry. Maybe I want to, divert people from what happened. Maybe I want to set up other people as the ones to blame for the outcome, and so on. So is it adaptive to be attentive to the possibility of social punishments? Yes. Is it, it's also relevant to be aware of the possibility of social rewards, including the increase, decrease, or maintenance of a certain level of reward. So I want to be attentive to possible futures, and I also want to be attentive to the consequences of disappointing people. And when I'm, if I'm scared of disappointing someone, that means that they're important to me, or I perceive that they're important to me. I'm scared of disappointing someone. I'm scared of punishment from them. I'm scared of a discontinuing of rewards. Guilt goes with all of those things. Or can go with all of those things. This idea that it's my fault is actually optional. So I can be scared of punishment. I can be concerned, cautious, alert to possible future negative consequences. And I can speak, it's my fault. Why do people ever do that? Why is that adaption developed? It is an adaption to say, it's my fault. Well, it can actually be beneficial. The reason people practice guilt is as an adaption. It's to promote their outcomes. It's to promote their favorite outcomes, to promote their preferences. So if I say, that was my fault, I'm sorry, I'm the one to blame for that, that is a communication that could be rewarded or could be encouraged. People may promote accepting responsibility. If there's something uncertain or unreliable, if I know that someone else has an expectation and I say to them, your expectation in relation to me is too high, that's an interesting possibility. If I feel that someone's expectation of me is too low, I might tell them that, but that's not that surprising in a way that I would want to, tell them that I think that they're underestimating me. But if someone's overestimating me, when would I tell them that? Why would I tell them that? One thing is to just avoid complications, to keep things simple. And it actually promotes a long-term healthy relationship for me to tell someone if I think their expectations are too high. I say, I want you to, give me a smaller responsibility for now. In the long run, I may, reach the level you seem to think I'm already at, but maybe a lesser responsibility for now would be more appropriate. So, if I think that I should be better than I am, or I should have been better than I am, that corresponds to guilt too. I should have done better than I did. Why should I have done better than I did? I did what I did, and then I have some ideal, or maybe somebody else had an expectation. But if there's a difference between their expectation and my actual reality, am I to blame for the difference between their expectation of my reality? Well, if I want their ongoing attention and interest, then maybe I say to them, your expectation is great. Your expectation helps me. I am below it. I am guilty for not being up to your expectation, but I'm still going to maintain your expectation as my target, as my model, and on from there. So I say to them, I'm guilty of not fitting your expectation. So it could be adaptive to express guilt or to express an acknowledgement of a difference between maybe some high level of results, some high amount of performance, and the actual performance or actual reality of my recent history, for instance. If I have an internal expectation and I'm pretending to fit it, ooh boy, that can get complex. If I'm if I have some ideals about what's perfect, I'm pretending that I fit those ideals so as to promote receiving social rewards or encouragement and so on. And then I know that I actually don't fit those. There's a couple things at least, maybe 3, 4, 9, whatever. There's a couple incidences that don't perfectly match with the ideals or the expectations. Then guilt can arise. And guilt means I'm hiding behind some pretense of my actual competence. So instead of saying, well, here's exactly how confident I am, I'm pretending. In guilt, that's when someone is pretending to be more competent than they are. If someone's pretending to be more competent than they are, and they know that they're not that competent, then their typical experience is that they feel guilty for not being that competent. So they're trying to compensate. They're trying to fake their way through it. They're trying to maybe they're trying to close the gap between their actual competence and whatever the expectation or target or ideal is. Maybe their guilt is like this internal experience, knowing that, well, there's a difference between some expectation and where I'm at. Maybe they pretend that they're already there, but the guilt can be that focal shift. I experience guilt, which is a shift of focus toward some target or expectation, and I'm saying I'm not there, and I'm going to get there. That's how guilt can actually be useful, is as that motivating factor. I want to go from here to there. I know where there is. I know where here is. I want to go from here to there. And guilt is that state of discontent. It's not the same as disappointment or regret. There's a motivation and a determination. I want to make some change. So guilt, we've talked about it in a lot of different ways, but this last framing of guilt is a motivating factor. Oh, I feel guilt about a certain possibility and not having fulfilled it yet. Oh, I feel guilty. That's obviously related to disappointment. But guilt also could correspond to a sense that I could do that in the future. I think I can get there. I wouldn't be guilty for something that I feel is completely out of reach for me. If I feel like I think I could get there. I'm not there yet. I'd like to be, and I think I could get there. Oh, guilt. Oh, okay. So wait a minute. All of a sudden, guilt sounds pretty positive. Freedom from guilt. Are you sure you want freedom from guilt? Maybe you want freedom to have, a totally new experience of guilt. As when you have some target, you're not at the target, and you think that you can get there. Guilt. Oh, okay. Guilt. That's that tension of, there's something that's important to me that is not yet fulfilled, and the perception of some element of hope that there's a way for me to do this. Maybe I don't know it yet, but maybe there's a way for me to go from here to there. The target that's attractive to me. I would assume that some of the material you just heard was a little different from how you've ever thought about some of these issues. Feel free to comment or share or communicate. You may also be aware that I have made myself available for interacting one-on-one with people who are interested in developing their self-awareness and improving their results. People who want to identify targets to organize their actions. Or people who already have identified attractive targets for organizing their actions, and they would like assistance in organizing their actions to produce the fulfillment of those targets. Thanks for listening.